My friends, good day. I'm here to tell you a story that happened during the night of May 21st to 22nd, 2025. We are at Teterboro Airport on the east coast of the United States. We have a Citation II type aircraft. It's a direct private jet that's going to take off just before midnight. On board, there are 6 people. The pilot's name is Dave Shapiro, and it's actually his personal aircraft. The registration is November 666DSC, a registration obtained from the FAA, and it includes his lucky number plus his initials. The destination tonight is San Diego. They want to go to Montgomery Field. It's an executive airport, a private jet airport, which is located in Southern California. In other words, it means traveling diagonally across the United States from end to end. Flying at night. I'll add another detail. Since the aircraft is a private flight, it's operated under what's called Part 91 rules, which are fairly relaxed regulations. The owner was able to get a waiver from the FAA to fly the aircraft alone, so he's the only pilot that night. So the plane takes off and there are 6 people on board. So there's Dave Shapiro, but there are also agents, musicians, people from his close entourage, let's say. And then they're heading to San Diego, which they should reach at around 4 a.m. local time. The plane takes off into the American sky. And then there's something you should know about Montgomery Field Airport. It's an airport with limited resources, so it's not monitored 24 hours a day, only until 6 p.m. The air traffic controller closes the control tower, locks it up, goes home, and comes back the next day. The next day at 7 a.m., so during the night, there is no air traffic control service at this airport. So there you have it. Our pilot. So he basically does the whole flight to the destination, right? And then he will begin his descent. He can't talk to the Montgomery Field controller because there isn't one, but he talks to a regional controller, so he's going to have a second concern. That's next. Normally, at the airport, there's what's called an automated surface observing system. It's a system, it's an automatic weather station. It's a kind of station that has a system to measure wind, rainfall, cloud height, visibility, all that. And actually, it automatically generates weather messages for aviation and other services that need them. This automated surface observing system station had been out of order for about 3 years, and we didn't have the budget to fix it. So it's an airport that has gradually fallen into disrepair. So that night, the pilot couldn't get first-hand weather information from this airport. So he's going to talk to the air traffic controller and ask him, "Can you give me a hand to find out the weather?" The controller knows that not far from this airport, about 5 or 6 kilometers away, there's Miramar Airport. It's an airport that belongs to the American military. So there are planes, among others, stealth planes and all that, which are stationed there. And since it's a critical airport for the military, there's staff there day and night, so what the controller does is contact them to ask about the weather on their field. So it's not perfect. But I can't give you the weather conditions in Montgomery, but what I can do for you is tell you the weather conditions 4 miles from there. After that, you figure it out. You try to imagine a little, piece things together yourself. The Miramar controllers will report bad weather and simply say that's how it is here. Temperature 14 degrees, wind gusts 14 degrees. That means the temperature has reached a level where water will start and the humidity in the air will begin to appear as droplets. So it will form clouds, fog. All of that, in terms of visibility, is about 800 meters. We could have expected 800 meters of visibility. At night, it feels even worse than during the day. Otherwise, the clouds are at 200 feet. There's a complete cloud ceiling, 8 octaves. As we used to say back then, the sky is completely overcast, and the clouds are about 200 feet. It's serious, so we're talking about 60 meters, so it's not very good weather. There might be good news, there's no wind. Usually fog means no wind. Why? Because when there's wind, it tends to disperse the fog. Our pilot is informed, isn't he, about this weather? and he decides to continue to Montgomery Field. Another detail, for some time now, part of the lighting, which was supposed to land on the island of runways 28 actually, some of the lights are in line with the axis. The runway before the main runway, well, was out of order. It had been out of order for some time and we hadn't had time. The budget, all that, the permits to repair them. So, a few lights missing in itself. It's not the end of the world for a landing. If the weather is good and it's daytime, it's less critical. Except that here, in extremely degraded conditions, more than a minimum. Well, it's a bit like instrument flight rules. So there you go, the pilot, that's it. But he still decides to continue. We're clearly in a situation of tunnel vision. According to the Bureau of Inquiry and Analysis, the French Bureau of Inquiry and Analysis sometimes mentions fascination with the objective. Why is that? Because when you take a plane, when you fly with an airline, if the pilot or the airline decides that this flight can't take place under good safety conditions, they'll cancel it or change the departure time, saying we're not leaving or leaving in 4 hours. Passengers who aren't happy can definitely go complain at the counter, right? They can definitely go bother the agents, right, from the check-in desk, but it won't go any further than that. On the other hand, when you're the one operating a plane and you have crew on board and you're responsible for them, in a way, if you don't land at your destination, you have to take care of it, you have to find them Ubers, find hotels, all that, and then the next day, get them to their final destination. And unfortunately, in many cases like this, in light aviation or private aviation anyway, we're not really in light aviation, we still have a private jet. Well, that creates a pressure that makes me absolutely want to land. On top of that, add fatigue. I'm working alone. There's no one he can share with or talk to, even if the guy is very experienced in aviation. But he's still all alone, so he can't have someone to talk to. Saying, what should we do? Maybe we could divert, all that. So at this point, he absolutely wants to land. He has this determination to go and land. So he makes an approach, a global positioning system approach. We won't know, we'll never know all the details. The reason we won't know is that there's no flight recorder in this plane. So there's what we call a cockpit voice recorder. That means there's a cockpit voice recorder. It means there's a recorder for voices and sounds in the cockpit. There are microphones that pick it up and it's recorded. But on the other hand, the flight data or parameters are not captured and the plane wasn't required to have a recorder. Why? Because once again, it's operated under Part 91 and generally there are a lot of exemptions. There are plenty of things that would be mandatory under 135 or even 121, but not under 91. Well, our aircraft begins its descent and then it flies a bit too low compared to the descent plan. That is to say, in particular, the National Transportation Safety Board reveals a point. There is a point where the aircraft was supposed to pass at approximately 1,300 feet above sea level, 1,300 feet of altitude. Well, the aircraft flies over that point, believe it or not, at 1,100 feet. That means we're in a situation where the plane is flying quite consistently below the minimum altitudes. And we know why. We saw a lot of these accidents in the 70s and 80s and we hoped they had disappeared completely. But unfortunately, we're seeing a bit of a comeback of these things. It's that we have a pilot flying low, thinking that by flying lower, I'll maximize the chances of seeing the runway lights and landing. Whereas if I respect the altitudes, I'll probably reach a point where I have to decide if I don't see the runway, it'll be a go around. I mean, at night, what am I doing at 4 a.m? I'm exhausted. If I go around, what do I do? Turn around, come back, land, divert to another airport, all that. You see, it's still quite a lot. It's still quite a lot of pressure for a single pilot, so he starts flying consistently too low. Of course, we have what we call the ground proximity warning system or the ground proximity warning system in these situations, which can still be a last lifeline. But very often when we're in landing configuration, gear down, flaps down, all that, the ground proximity warning system interprets. We're nearing the ground, but we know what we're doing. And a certain number of these alert modes are inhibited, so it can't really react until we're practically on the ground. Otherwise, it would yell whenever we land. So that's why it has this tendency or this logic or this algorithm that makes it, when it senses the plane is going to land, it tends to hold back a little bit. So what we have at a certain point is that the plane is about 2.5, 3 kilometers from the runway and it's flying. At 60 feet or about 20 meters, we're 3 kilometers from the runway and 20 meters above the ground. It's definitely not a promising situation. Few people around, especially at night in the fog with zero visibility. Very few people have found success starting from such initial conditions. What's going to happen is that he's going to hit, it's clear, that's why we're here, he's going to hit a high voltage line, which is quite surprising because he's at 60 feet above ground, and the high voltage line was measured at 95 feet above ground. That means it's almost unbelievable that he hit the line. He was supposed to go underneath it without even realizing he did, because he was so low that I would have expected it more. He was more likely to hit a truck or something else than a high voltage line because he was flying too low. What he's going to do is hit the high voltage line. It's going to cut off the tail, which means the back of the plane will hit the cable. So at that moment, we have the rudder, we have the direction control, we have the vertical stabilizer, a good part of the horizontal stabilizer, and everything is torn off. So if you want, part of the tail is going to be torn off. At that moment, suddenly we'll find out when we get there. When the investigators arrive on the scene, the first thing they'll find is the power line. In addition, these lines make it possible when planes hit them to date the exact moment of the accident with extreme precision. Why? Because when a plane hits them, it can create at the level of the electrical operator either short circuits, spikes, or something that they will notice. And it's time-stamped. To the millisecond it hits it, the back of the plane is torn off, it will fall almost 60 meters from the power line, the aircraft continues for 300 meters, right? Then it's going to crash into a house. There are 8 people on the ground who are fortunately only slightly injured. The house was gutted. A big fire broke out in the neighborhood. About 20 vehicles were destroyed on the ground. But fortunately, it's a miracle. The 8 people on the ground who were involved are all safe and sound. A lot of material damage, so the house, the car, and of course the private jet are destroyed. The human toll from the night is 6 dead. Dave Shapiro, the 5 people who were with him, unfortunately everyone lost their lives in that accident. So we're dealing with an accident called controlled flight into terrain, which means controlled flight into terrain. It has even happened to Boeing 747s. You can check it out on this channel. There are a lot of cases like that. But let's say aviation in general really started to become aware of this kind of accident. And normally they had tended to decrease significantly. But unfortunately, we are seeing a bit of a return of this type of tragedy, so there you have it, my friends. Focusing on the objective, pilot fatigue when alone, accumulation of problems, a light that's out, who went to check it? But it probably had nothing to do with it because the light was mostly burned out. The weather station that gives him nothing, maybe it's the weather station. They told him that if it had been working, it would have given even lower minimums than Miramar. Maybe he wouldn't have tried if the station worked, since with 800 meters of visibility at 5 kilometers, you can see that on site. At Montgomery, they had 300 meters or 200 meters, whatever. In any case, it was very poor. There you go, my friends. Thank you for listening to this video up to this point. I may discuss it with you when the final report is released, if there's anything new. Thank you to those who support the channel on Patreon. Let's be honest, this channel could never, ever have existed without you, and I'll see you in the next video.